Congratulations, there's a pretty good chance that you've helped Elon Musk become a trillionaire. This week in e-commerce, episode 141. I am now here back with you for another week. Alex is away sick, so it's just going to be me. And we've got a bit of a doozy of episode. Now, I also do apologize for recording this so late in the week. We weren't able to make our usual schedule because Alex is sick and I've also been traveling. So I'm recording from my favorite place in the world, Sydney Airport. But it has been a big week, and the big news this week is an EU law has come up that actually comes into force today that is going to affect pretty much any Aussie retailer who is selling into the EU at the moment. So it's called the withdrawal button. And here it is in one line that if a customer can buy from you in one click, they also need to have the ability to cancel in one click as well. That's pretty much what the EU's framing is. So it's a two-step button on your website, which you need to have, which has a withdraw from contract here, and then a confirmation button. So essentially it's a cooling off period where they have up to 14 days. Now, this applies to anyone selling into the EU. So it doesn't matter where you're based. It doesn't matter if you're based here in Australia. You need to make sure that you have this in place. So part of this is that it mimics what they already have with their cooling periods when you're there already, when you buy in a physical retail store. So they're just trying to apply that same approach to selling online. And what it means is that a customer pretty much has 14 days from buying the product to change their mind, even if they've received the product. Obviously, if they've used the product, it doesn't apply to that. But there are also some categories where that cooling off period actually can extend up to 12 months plus 14 days as well. It's really important to look at this. So if you don't have this in place or you haven't read Shopify's communications about this, go check that out now, because it's super important that you get onto this right away, because the penalties can be pretty severe, up to 4% of sales into the affected region. So definitely take a look at that. All right, our second quickie is about Grilled and a greenwashing scandal which they're caught up in. So the ACCC, who we've been talking about a lot, have taken Grilled to federal court. So they filed that this week and claimed that their promotion, which is Tree Day Tuesday, where you could buy a burger on a Tuesday and $1 would go towards planting trees. Now, this promotion ran for 3 years, from 2021 to 2024. Really nice, feel-good moment, and the sort of thing which, marketers love to talk about. But the problem, though, was that of the 5 million burgers that were sold on the Tuesday, the ACCC has said that only about 4% of them actually triggered a donation. So a very, very small number of that. So part of this was because the conditions about what qualified were buried so deep into the T's and C's and were never properly disclosed. And in 26 separate ads, the regulator said that they were overstating the impact of that. So it's a pretty big deal, because a lot of this is showing that you had to be like a member, you had to be buying something off like the main menu. There were so many conditions on it. And people weren't aware that people were going in there buying the burgers thinking that they were helping the environment, when really it wasn't going anywhere except for into Grilled pockets. So you need to make sure that when you are doing these type of promotions, that you make it really clear to the customer exactly what they're signing up for. Because if they feel that they're misled, chances are you might get caught up by the ACCC. And I know that in e-commerce world, we tend to do a lot of things that maybe a little bit too fast and too loose. I think that time has come to an end, and we really need to be looking at, if you're going to say you're going to do something, you've got to commit to it as well. And I know a number of brands, who I'm not going to bring up on the podcast, who have done something, promised they're going to donate X amount and not actually delivered on that. And a lot of this hasn't made the news, but one day it actually will. So definitely keep an eye out for that one. And our third quickie is Dropshop and Lincraft. So recently, Lincraft have announced that they are going to close all their retail stores. So there's about 60 or so stores nationally. And Alex and I have talked about this quite a bit in the past. But also a new retail concept, which is Dropshop, has come up. And now Dropshop is based in Brunswick East. They are a liquor store, and they're built around the idea of like a Japanese konbini store, so a convenience store. Small, so really about 60 square meters and 150 products. But when compared to other liquor stores, rather than breaking it into Shirazes, Cab Savs, Sauvignon Blancs, that sort of thing, they're focusing into more occasions and budgets. So breaking it up into weekday wine, 15 to 25 bucks, party wines, fancy wines, etc., things like that. So the same logic as what you get if you go and went to a smelling and actually spoke to someone about what would fit your budget or that type of occasion, they'd recommend that. It's founded by Dan Sims, who was the founder of Pinot Palooza and the chair of Wines Victoria. So it's a really interesting concept. So it's kind of two stories about physical retail, showing the kind of directions where things could be heading in, where we've got one brand like Lincraft, which has been around forever, who are announcing that they're closing all their stores and thinking there's no space for them, even though I would counter that in their particular category, people want to actually touch and feel the yarns they're about to buy, versus one where they've kind of looking to reinvent the entire way in which you purchase wine. Now, my thing about drop shop, though, is that, drop store, I should say, is that it feels like more of a feature than a product in itself, and there's no real moat around that. But let's see what actually happens with drop shop and see what actually happens. It is a very interesting bet, and definitely one which we want to watch out for to see whether this kind of changes how we look at merchandising and curation. So moving away from that very rational, I want a Shiraz, to more, I want to impress a first date with my choice of wine. But if it works, I dare say the likes of Dan Murphy's and BWS will probably jump into that one very, very quickly. Okay, moving into our first deep dive. And this one is a good one because Nike announced a few weeks back their first ever global gym partnership. So this isn't just about sponsoring an athlete. They're partnering with a gym chain globally, and it's an Australian one. It's the Yard Gym, who seem to be everywhere nowadays. So in the last 6 years, the Yard started in 2020. They are now in over 100 locations across Australia, the US, New Zealand, and Mexico. So really impressive growth. And Nike have become their exclusive hit partner, where there's going to be Nike branding in every single location, and they're going to be looking to co-build different training experiences together. So another brand collaboration, so you think, who cares? But here's the thing which makes it really interesting, because 2 months ago, Nike actually shut down all their own gyms. They had a concept boutique fitness store called Nike Studios. They built out 4 venues and nothing beyond that, and have decided that that wasn't going to work, so they shut them all down. Nike tried to build it, thinking that the gym's the right place for the environment for them to own, but weren't able to scale it. So rather than trying to build it and buy it, they're now renting that through the Yard. And I think that's the real story when it comes to value creation and community, because rather than trying to buy and build a whole new community in a business which is maybe adjacent but not part of Nike's core business, they're figuring out a smarter way to actually get involved in those sort of communities without necessarily having to have the same overheads they do. So I actually think this is a super, super smart move, and I really like it, because Nike aren't buying the real estate, they're not setting up the gyms, they're not having to take on those leases. They're just partnering with someone who already has that attention and is really super aligned to who they are already. So that's the sort of mental availability which they can spread out to these 100 locations super, super fast and get their brand in front of the people who are exactly their right type of customers, so that over time they're going to be convinced, and eventually when they go and buy the next pair of shoes, they're going to buy Metcons versus something else. So I love this, and that it also just proves you don't need to try to build everything as well. You don't need to try to own it yourself. And there are a lot of brands who've tried to do this with varying degrees of success over the years. But this is a much smarter and scalable way of doing it without having to necessarily take up a whole lot of capex to do as well. So I love this. You're tapping into where the community already is. And I think that this is something where, other brands should be looking to do as well, about thinking about who you could partner with to tap into a new community as well, and kind of almost rent that without necessarily having the necessary overheads. Now, the risk to all this, obviously, is that you're then tied to a partner where their fortunes may flag or fail, essentially. So you could look at the Yard, for instance, they're not F45s, but F45, they've obviously been going through a lot of their own troubles. If you partner with them, maybe not a great brand partnership now, and there may be some negative impact on your brand. So you always need to watch out for who you partner with. Make sure you're doing your due diligence as well, but also really looking beyond just being like putting their logo in there. How do you actually make it so it's actually a genuine experience? So I love the fact that it's going to be co-branded merchandise. They're going to be looking for coming up with different training experiences which are going to be Nike branded, which is really cool. And the final one, which I'm going to not super deep dive into, but really just want to make mention of, is that last week, SpaceX went public. So they went public on the 12th of June, listed on the NASDAQ, and became the single biggest float in history. So they raised roughly about $75 billion at a valuation of a staggering $1.8 trillion, which is bigger than Saudi Aramco. So the biggest float ever. But this in the process has also made Elon Musk a trillionaire. And if you're wondering why this matters to you, is that if you do have super, chances are your super actually went towards this as well. Because most of our superannuation funds do invest into different indices, different stock markets, so the NASDAQ being one. So there's a pretty good chance that you are also a part owner into SpaceX, whether you know it or not, and have also helped contribute towards Elon Musk becoming the world's first trillionaire. Now, the less said about that, the better. But I think, I don't think anyone really needs to be a trillionaire. And if you have that sort of money, what are you doing with it in the first place? Why aren't you going out there and helping to solve the world's problems besides just wanting to be a trillionaire? So that's all we have time for this week on a very, very quick episode of This Week in E-commerce, because I'm going to be boarding in about 5 minutes. So Alex will be back with us next week. We've got a lot more great stories, which I really want to dive into with her when she's back. But in the meantime, keep innovating, keep growing, and keep selling. And we'll see you back next week.